Hi everyone, and welcome to Autism and Neurodiversity Coaching's Neurodiverse Universe podcast with myself, Ben Holmes. Just a little bit about Autism Neurodiversity Coaching. We've had coaching for neurodiverse individuals, training for businesses, public speaking. We have an online content library, and we'd like to get involved in lots of other neurodiversity related things. You can visit our website at www.autism&NeurodiversityCoaching.co.uk. We also have a partner website called Autistic Army, which is www.autisticArmy.com. So let's get into today's podcast. So we have a guest with us today. So it's Sue Murphy, a neurodiversity coach and trainer. I'm sure you'll tell us about what else you do during the podcast as well. So great to have you here.
Thanks, Ben.
So we'll get into it, and we'll do what we normally do, which is ask a few questions to start with, and then we'll see where it goes. So just with yourself then, Sue, when were you actually diagnosed as dyspraxic?
No, that's fine. About going on for 4 years ago, and I was very fortunate because getting a diagnosis for dyspraxia as an adult is really hard because there isn't an NHS pathway, as I'm sure you and the people listening know. I'd started. I'm a qualified coach, and I'd started coaching before I got into neurodiversity coaching. I started doing some work for an organisation that specialised in assessment and workplace coaching for people with neurodiverse conditions. They're called Genius Within, if anyone wants to have a look at them. And while I was coaching for them, I started to recognise things about myself that were the same as the people I was coaching who had an assessment of being dyspraxic. I had a bit of a suspicion as a kid, because I'm clumsy, my fine motor skills aren't great, but it was barely recognised as a condition, and it certainly wasn't recognised in girls. It was thought to be something like a lot of neurodiverse conditions that boys and men suffered from. Anyway, I was able to get a full assessment through a qualified psychologist through Genius Within, and sure enough, I was dyspraxic. So at the grand old age of 62, I became a dyspraxic granny. And that's sometimes how I describe myself.
That sounds good. And to get diagnosed that late in life also shows it's worth doing as well. You know, you never told to get diagnosis, which I know some people think, once you get to a certain age, then there's no point pursuing it. But I completely disagree from a personal point of view and from the people that I've worked with, because there is a bit of grief and, well, does that alter who I am? No, it doesn't. It just means you understand more about who you are. And the sense of relief at being able to understand some of those things that keep tripping us up, literally in my case, as someone who's dyspraxic, is really helpful in getting rid of those notions of, oh, well, people give me labels like you're lazy, you're careless, you're disorganized, that must be a matter of will. If you know there is a neurological difference causing those effects, it's much easier to say, okay, well, I'm going to be kind to myself about those. I'm going to see what else it brings me. Does it bring me strengths as well? And put things in place to cope with the challenging effects. No, makes complete sense. And what would you say a diagnosis meant to you? You may have already answered, or anyway.
Well, it it meant that I understood, I kind of have touched on it. It meant I understood a lot more about myself. And the big thing for me about the diagnosis was that all I understood really about dyspraxia till I started coaching was the motor functions, and it's my fine motor skills that are affected most. What I didn't realize until I had the assessment was that the executive function issues that I have, the planning and prioritization, the time management, sense of space, were all part of my dyspraxic profile. So I hadn't even realized, and those were the things that I was beating myself up for, and I wasn't doing as well as I could have done in some of the jobs I've had, because I didn't realize that it wasn't just, well, it is just me, but there was a reason for why I struggled with the things I struggled with. So what it meant for me was a much better understanding of myself and an ability to say, okay, I'm going to stop telling myself I should do better there and say, that's a challenge for me. What can I put in place so that I can function at a competent level? Just like, you know, my glasses, my vision is impaired. No amount of positive thinking is going to make my eyesight any better. The glasses will, and it's then my responsibility to wear them. Does that make sense?
Completely. Yeah. And I'm sure it will do for everyone listening as well. So the next question I normally ask is, how did knowing you're dyspraxic change your life? But again, I think you've sort of touched on a lot of that, unless there's anything you want to add specifically with that. So more in terms of how you view things, etc. But yeah, if you don't want to add anything to
that. Just two extra things. One is it's meant I've given myself permission to outsource some things. So I do not do my social media. I can't organise myself to do my social media. I don't care enough. So a wonderful friend of mine does that. My bookkeeping, my accountant does. So that so it's been partly that, and also finding myself part of a wider community, a wider neurodiverse community, because as you'll know, Ben, there's so many connections between the different labels, so many effects that we all have, although they might present slightly differently. So I would say becoming part of a wider neurodiverse community has been a big bonus from the diagnosis.
Yeah, and I think the point you mentioned about getting help for social media and your accountant, etc., I think that's a real important thing to say, because you know, a lot of people have these beliefs that you have to do everything yourself, which for neurodiverse people, it should, I don't think it works for a lot of people really, but yeah, and that's a very, very valid point as well. So in terms of like once you got diagnosed, your friends and family, how did they respond to it in any particular way? Was there any, you know, anything they said you found out?
They've mostly been very positive, and I was fortunate because I was already working in an environment that valued neurodiversity. So I wasn't working for an employer that didn't understand or thought I was, you know, making things up. I wasn't applying for jobs. That was huge. My friends and family, so it took a little while because they didn't understand what it was either, to a large extent. So but they've all been absolutely brilliant. And what I have done is say to my friends and family, it's not I don't know what you're like about that language on your podcast, Ben. Can I swear?
Sure, go for it.
It's not okay for my friends and family to take the piss out of me because I trip over things or I struggle with something. So they've taken a little bit of learning about that, and I'll kind of say to them, if somebody had cerebral palsy and was not confident walking, would you take the mick out of them? No, of course not. Well, then you can't take the mick out of me, and I won't put up with it anymore.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. Totally understand. I mean, we'll get more onto dyspraxia as we progress as well, I'm sure. But yeah, just the lack of knowledge of dyspraxia in general, I think. I mean, obviously I talk about autism, ADHD and other things, but dyspraxia, there's still a hell of a lot of people who've never even heard of it, let alone know what it is about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's definitely I think with this podcast, I've done a few with people autistic. This is the first one with dyspraxia, so I think it'll be really interesting as well. So have you received any support? Because this is an interesting question, because like with autism, a lot of the time once you get diagnosed, you're then left to it. Some areas of the country that are really good for autism support, same way. So with dyspraxia, I'd be interested to know if you've received any sort of support with that.
No, I haven't, but I do know that if because I work for myself, if I applied for reasonable adjustments under access to work, which is the DWP scheme for providing reasonable adjustments to help people be okay at work, whether they've got a disability or some other limiting condition. So I probably could probably get some text to speech, speech to text software. But no, and I think with dyspraxia, there's almost nothing. And that's because it's still not known. I think there's more help for children because the developmental stages that might be a bit delayed in a child with dyspraxia. There's some help through the school system. There's help at university in the same way as there might be for somebody with dyslexia. But once you're an adult, it's basically up to you, as you will have found. I mean, the only advantage compared to, if you can call it that, I'm aware that a lot of people with a diagnosis of autism find themselves being viewed through a mental health lens, which is not helpful. With dyslexia and dyspraxia, that doesn't happen so much. Well, it doesn't happen because they're seen as learning difficulties rather than, as ADHD and autism often are, as aspects of mental health. So
yeah, I think that's interesting point to bring up. Yeah, and like I say again, it's interesting to talk. Well, following up, the next question is, do you have any other conditions that you know of? So, but yeah, that's like I say, because a lot of people I speak to have got multiple conditions. One of them tends to be autism or ADHD, which then gets lumped in with another thing like mental health, whatever. So yeah, do you have any other conditions that you know of?
No, and when I was assessed, it was a pretty full assessment. They did check for ADHD, and I wasn't assessed with ADHD. However, I recognise a lot of traits in myself that are common to ADHD. Now, I don't. My thinking about that, and I'm no sort of expert, but I follow Amanda Kirby's work quite a lot, and she looks at neurodiversity in the round. Yeah. My take on that is that there is a neurodiverse spectrum, and we're starting to think that all these conditions may be aspects of one set of changes in the neurology. So I'm sorry, I'm wittering, which is something else I don't know. But basically, I don't know whether my executive function challenges are because I've got a degree of undiagnosed ADHD, or that it's just part of my neurodiversity and an aspect of my dyspraxia. I'm quite happy to see it as that. Partly because there's no benefit to me in getting another assessment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I know we spoke about ADHD, we spoke about it in the past, and he wasn't sure at the time. And as you've said, there's a lot of overlaps with some of these, just make it hard to sometimes diagnose one or the other or both, etc. So yeah, that makes complete sense. And again, like I said, I mean, I've got both ADHD and dyspraxia, so I have to try and separate it in mind. That's dyspraxia, that's ADHD, but that could be the overlap bit. So it's quite interesting. So with this podcast, as I said, people come on here who are autistic or ADHD, and I always ask them if they see that as disability. So I'll ask the same question for yourself, or well, I'll say it for dyspraxia. You can answer it for the other conditions as well if you want to. Yeah, do you see dyspraxia as a disability?
No, I don't. I see it as an impairment in some circumstances, but I tend to look to the social model of disability My dyspraxia causes me some challenges. It means I have to be more careful about my driving. It means I have to fight to be organised and to manage my time and put tools in place. So there are degrees of things that I find less easy, but I don't see it as a disability. Having said that, for a child with really noticeable gross motor skill problems at school, it could be, and it often co-occurs with, I can never pronounce it properly, but Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, hypermobility. Yeah. But no, I don't, Ben, any more than I regard having to wear glasses or hearing aids as a disability, and I don't regard either of those as a disability.
Yeah, and would you say that that applies to sort of autism, ADHD as well? Would you?
That's well, I can't judge that because the impacts on other individuals, but certainly I don't see the autistic clients and the clients with ADHD and the clients with dyslexia that I see as disabled in any way. They are people with huge strengths, often huge creativity, and they're living in a world that is set up for the majority who are neurotypical with, you know, a fairly, dare I say, boring way of seeing the world. Yeah. So it does cause challenges, and I know for some people they will say it is frigging disabling. I can't leave the house on my own, or you know, I can't hold a job down. But I would come back to the social model of disability and say, well, are you disabled because you're autistic or you have ADHD, or are you disabled by the society that's not set up to be flexible enough for you to thrive?
Yeah. Yeah, no. Yeah. What it does to me, I'm sure it will do to everyone else as well. So I like to throw in a random question, just because. So, what is your favourite colour?
Oh, my favourite colour is green. There's just so many shades of it, and it's, you know, it's the colour of life outside. But yeah, it's always been green ever since I was a kid. It's always been green.
Okay. And this one again, I normally ask for autism, ADHD, so I don't know how it fits in with you, but special interest, would you say you have any special interests? And if so,
yeah, a bit. I have a special interest in words. So I'm definitely not dyslexic, Ben. So I get really annoyed if things are spelt wrongly or grammar isn't right. And so definitely words. And I'm very interested. I'm a bird watcher. I'm not a twitcher, but I am a bird watcher. So yeah, not to the point where other people will say, I'm not talking to you anymore because you're just boring, unless I really start on about how something's been written. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And if you could meet any celebrity or celebrities, I guess, who would it be and why? It could be no one. So
can I have more than one?
Yeah.
Maggie Aderin Pocock. If I could only meet one, it would be Maggie Aderin Pocock. She is one of our best scientists. She's a cosmologist. She's Black. She's dyslexic and she's dyspraxic, and she's fabulous. So I would love to meet her because she's really lively and warm. And I'd love to meet Chris Packham on a day when he felt okay about having a chat. Not when he's standing, because I know people will go up and say, oh, Chris Packham, you wonderful, you know, want to talk to you, at a point where he is overloaded, he's being polite, and he just wants to get out of the room. But I would love to have a relaxed chat with Chris Packham.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I like asking that question because obviously get a range of different answers. Obviously, it's interesting you picked two that are neurodiverse as well, which I think is really.
Oh yeah, well yes, that's interesting because you didn't actually say which neurodiverse, but that's where my mind went. And regardless of their neurodiversity, I would love to talk to those two people. I find them both inspiring.
Yeah, that's really good. So just in terms of where we go from here, really, I mean, we can talk about whatever. So I mean, with dyspraxia, again, because I don't get too many guests on here who have dyspraxia. I think it's worth talking about that. So, I mean, yeah, is there anything you want to say about dyspraxia in general? You know, anything about it really, I can sort of prompt a bit more.
Yeah, there's a couple of things, and one of them is that it seems to be less noticeable in adults because adults are not made to do physical activity. So we can choose not to engage in and you know, some people, there's an international rugby player who's dyspraxic. I can't remember his name, but I think he's played for Leicester Tigers.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with his ball control or the way he plays, but for a lot of us, the dyspraxia will mean that we'll hold back from trying various physical activities, and I think that has an impact on our health.
Yeah.
And I have 2 personal training sessions a week to help me with my mobility, strength and balance, because now I'm getting older, and I think this is a potential issue for older adults with dyspraxia. Our risk of falls is higher than it is for our age group generally.
Yeah.
So the more we can do to practice, because with dyspraxia, I'm sure you know this, Ben, we find it really hard to learn things, whether it's how to use an IT system or a set of physical steps. But if we practice hard enough, once we've got it, we keep it. So it is worth taking time and knowing that your balance may never be as good as the person next to you to improve those things in a safe environment. And I would say now, because it's something I practice regularly, I'd argue that my risk of falling is probably slightly lower than a woman of my age who doesn't do any strength or balance work.
Yeah.
Because it's something I've worked on.
Yeah, and I think with you mentioning with your age and stuff as well, I think because there won't be that many people talking about dyspraxia at all, but obviously ones you have gone many years without knowing about it, etc. I mean, I don't think I've not heard too many people talk about that at your age, talking about how it can affect you, how you so in that sense. So yeah, I think a lot of people will sort of take value in that. I think. So obviously myself, you know, I've got it, but I've got a different set of challenges. Obviously, when I get older, I've got to think about these things as well. I can't rely on obviously as I get older, I won't be able to rely on certain things, so I've got to adapt. I think that's good to know as well.
Can you drive, Ben? Do you drive?
Yes.
Yeah. And
yeah, go on.
no, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I'm going to say I do. It brings challenges. So yeah, I mean, yeah, let's talk about that, because that is a whole thing in itself. So yeah, what's your experience with driving? What sort of things do you struggle with? How do you have to adapt?
Yeah, and it is something that dyspraxic adults often struggle with, is learning to drive. I mean, I passed my tests when I was 30, long before I knew I was dyspraxic at the 3rd go. The things I struggle with are these things about awareness of space and speed. So I often I don't have bad accidents, but knock the side of the car because I haven't figured out whether there's enough space for parking. I'll knock wing mirrors off. And I used to get quite a lot of speeding tickets because I didn't have a good sense of how fast I was going. And I had a day's I was on the point of losing my license because I got a 4th speeding ticket in about 12 months, which is unusual. Anyway, I had a day's advanced driving training at the recommendation of somebody I'd asked about, well, how do I manage to keep my license? And they said, well, get some training, because at least then you can say to the court, I recognise this is my problem. And that was fantastic, because that was just before I found out I was dyspraxic, but he picked up straight away on my poor spatial awareness, my poor perception of speed and distance, and made me practice thinking about how far am I from the left-hand side, because my road positioning was awful. for example, I was always up against the middle of the road. That was one of the best £400 I've ever spent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, like when you said about knocking things, I did that quite a bit when I first started driving, and I managed to. But I don't do that now. But I can remember thinking back, there were quite a few times where parking and things like that, or with I bump into not obviously not big accidents, but just not. So I did that because of the spatial awareness. I used to struggle. I still do to a degree, not as much, but if there's not as much of a space for you to drive through as there normally is, and just get through or not, I just manage with that. But yeah, I used to hate that in the past. Like if there's a bus was parked up on the side of the road or something, and I get through. So yeah, and I think that's really interesting. The speeding one, yeah, that. I mean, I'm not too bad. Well, I've never had a speeding ticket in my life, but I'd say probably the autism side of it helps me with that, I guess, because I've got these other conditions. They all sort of
yeah, I can imagine actually.
I mean, with driving, I passed my test first time, but I failed the theory twice, which is I suppose some people, well, myself, I would have thought it might have been it that I'd passed that first time and was driving, but yeah, I mean, just thinking about dyspraxia in itself and forget about all the other conditions, like changing gears and stuff. I always struggled. I still do sometimes going from 5th gear to 4th gear.
Yeah.
The other gears tend to be fine, but it's when I go from 5th to 4th I have an issue with. And I think the reason for that is because I don't have a 6th gear. You're not going straight down, so
yeah, you're going down and across, aren't you?
Yeah, so that I still struggle with. And I remember on my driving lessons, I actually there was this particular turning where he'd advised me to go from 5th to 2nd.
Wow.
And I'd struggle because I'd be driving at a certain speed, like 50 mile an hour, whatever. Then I'd slow down. It'd say you don't need to go from 5th to 4th to 3rd to whatever. And I go 2nd. I can remember stalling it quite a few times. Quite dangerous actually. So I just couldn't get it from one to the next.
No, yeah, I do this. I will never go from 5th to 2nd. I've got to go 4th, 3rd, 2nd.
Yeah.
I wouldn't find it otherwise, but also it just feels wrong.
Yeah. I don't do it now. I don't know why he just advised me. What are you like for motorway driving? How do you find that?
I'm fine with motorway driving because it's because I came so close to losing my license. I'm now really fixated on making sure that I'm within the speed limit. And generally, I don't do a lot of it since COVID. I used to do a lot of motorway driving. I've done next to none since COVID. But I'm okay with it.
Okay.
What about you?
Yeah, I think the main thing with me is mirrors.
Yeah.
I really struggle with mirrors in the sense of I hate being in the middle lane of the motorway.
Oh yeah.
I like being in the fast lane, but I don't like being in the middle lane. 'Cause it's the middle and I'm looking for cars coming behind me. I can't tell which lane they're in.
Yeah.
So that can be quite frightening. So like if people saying you can pull out, I'm thinking, well, I don't know if I can because I can see a car behind me. I don't know if it's in the fast lane or in the slow lane. So yeah, that is quite worrying. The other thing with mirrors is hospitals. Where they have, I presume you've been to Chesterfield Hospital where they have the mirrors in the top corner. So if you're walking down a corridor, it helps you see if someone else is coming from a direction. If there's more than one way you can turn, I can't tell where they're coming from.
Yes.
Coming, but I don't know which way. So I sort of move. I look in the mirror and I move, but I can't tell which way I need to go.
Yeah, I'm the same. I can park with mirrors, but anything like that, and the same with the judging where a car coming up behind you is. So I guess I've got more cautious over the years. I will if I can, I will stick in the inside lane and only overtake when I know I'm comfortable that I can do that. But that mirrors thing, I will just stop until they've come and gone past.
Yeah.
So that I know if they bang into me, that's their problem, but I'm going to stay where I am until they've gone.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah, yeah. And one thing I was going to bring up, so like when I've met in the past, one thing that stands out to me with this dyspraxia is a spatial awareness. Like when you've said bumping into things, I think
Yeah.
definitely more obvious than myself. That's one thing I've noticed. And yeah, you do amazing just to sort of manage it all with that, because I've seen it like because like I've seen you bump into things after, and it looks like you've got enough space there. So you must really have struggled with that one in the past.
Yeah, I hadn't realised how much I struggled with it, but I definitely do. And in one sense, COVID's been really good for me because I work almost exclusively online now. I am seeing a client live in Derby, and but I'm doing a lot less moving about, and I hate it, going into a room I don't know. And I never feel like there's enough room, and I've always got bumps and bruises. And that's one of the things, I said earlier about telling my friends and family to stop taking the mic, taking the mickey out of me.
Yeah.
That's one of those things.
Yeah.
Dropping things and spilling things and bumping into furniture, it is quite noticeable, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I noticed it really. It stood out to me. Like I said, I probably don't struggle with that as much. Well, I know I don't. So I mean, with yourself, so you've said it's the fine motor skills. Do you struggle with motor skills at all, or is it mainly just the fine?
I think it's mostly the fine ones, but because I was assessed as an adult in terms of cognitive, as a neurodiverse adult in terms of cognitive effects, there was no test for my gross motor skills. Now, I loved gymnastics at school, but I was hopeless at ball skills. So, and I have always just bumped into things, tripped over, and so it's only now that I look back on that in me as a child and think, well, somebody might have noticed that I kept doing that. But it wasn't something that girls had. So, I was just a clumsy child.
Yeah.
And that doesn't do a lot for your self-esteem.
No, definitely not. No, it's interesting you say that, like sort of ball sports, because like I always did well with ball sports. There were certain things I didn't do too well with. Anything that I'd call fiddly, I guess. I'm trying to think. I mean, sport generally I did okay, but I had to do some things my own way. But whereas my sister, who has dyspraxia, she always struggled with the ball sport. She couldn't do it at all, and hated doing that. So yeah, and she struggles with the growth side of it as opposed to the fine. So she can do things I can't, and vice versa. But of course, you can have both, can't you? So you can have
absolutely. I mean, it's like ADHD and having the hyperactive and the inattentive bits. I could play netball, and when I think back, when you play netball, and I used to play in a position where you were even more fixed, you're usually fixed to the spot to pass the ball.
Yeah.
You're not trying to run and handle the ball, and it's a whacking great ball. So, even I've got more chance of catching a netball than, say, hitting it. I can't play tennis. I was okay at hockey, mostly because I'd run about. I didn't have much contact with the ball. And I can swim, which some people with dyspraxia struggle with because it's cross the midline. So coordinating I can swim no problem at all, but ball sports and balance, my balance is just not good.
Yeah, I can understand, resonate with that. I mean, swimming, I always swimming. I still do to a degree. I don't do it normally as such. So yeah. So in terms of your work, what you do. So just for those listening, so if you want to just say where you're based, what area you sort of cover, or because you've said you do online, is there any, you know, in-person stuff? Where do you sort of travel, etc.?
I'm based in Drumfield, which is between Chesterfield and Sheffield in northeast Derbyshire. I would say now I would cover the East Midlands and South Yorkshire. I don't want to travel any further than that now, because I just find it so much easier not to have to do that. So in the past I would go and work in Solihull. I've gone up to do stuff in Stockton-on-Tees. I won't do that anymore. But yeah, Derbyshire, East Midlands, South Yorkshire, that's my patch, I would say.
Yeah. And in terms of the work you do, what, just for those listening, what do you do at the moment? What areas do you specialise in, and what do you enjoy doing and sort of want to do?
I love coaching, and I love delivering training and facilitating. I'm good face to face with people, at least I think I am. And most of the coaching and work I do is actually around neurodiversity now, because it's an area I feel at home in. I can use my coaching skills, I can use my curiosity. So I can coach on, you know, all the other standard things about professional development and personal development and managing change. But basically, I coach people I coach neurodiverse people. And I'm very happy having that slot. I want to do more work with small businesses, and I think we've talked about this before, because the big organisations take advantage of funding from things like Access to Work to put adjustments in place for people. But creative people, entrepreneurial people, are often neurodiverse, and in smaller companies, they're not getting the chance to make that level of inclusion a benefit to the business in the same way as a corporate organisation does, because it has HR functions and training functions who can spend their time finding out about it.
Yeah, that's fine. And yeah, if there's anything else you want to add about the work you do, if you don't want to, I can ask you something else. Is there anything you want?
No, I don't think so.
So that wasn't a trick question, by the way, just in case you wanted to add anything else. So employment, before you did what you do now, how have you found employment, sort of looking back in terms of dyspraxia?
It's really interesting, because I've had some I've worked mostly in the public sector. I've worked for myself before, but not for very long. And I've always made progress to a level. Things like, I worked in regeneration, and I was responsible for building partnerships and bringing people together and talking about a vision. I was great at all of that. But my organisational skills have let me down in a number of posts, and there's a couple of my ex-bosses I'd like to go back to and say, look, I'm really sorry I was so rubbish at that, and here's why. So I've always worked. I've always been, and that's the other thing, as you know about neurodiversity, it doesn't impact our intellectual ability at all. And I'm bright, like so many of us. I'm really bright. So I've always done reasonably well in work, but not as well as I might have done if I'd understood more, and the people around me had understood more about my strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, totally understand that. So in terms of you know, doing any sort of talks you do, whether, you know, training it, is there any challenges that come with that? Is there anything you particularly enjoy or don't like?
The challenges are around getting my stuff ready on time, and I mean, you know, getting my materials ready on time, and and not keeping people waiting for things I've said, oh, I'll write a bit on that, and then not doing it. And getting myself there with everything I need. But once I'm there and I'm stood up in front of people, I'm fine. Particularly doing the sort of stuff I do now where I haven't got to follow a fixed script. I'm talking about something I know and love. And that I find a joy. And at the end of November, I'm doing some live training with a friend of mine who works for Staff College on neurodiversity and disability, and I am going to go into that room and say, I need to take my shoes off so I can feel grounded. That's part of I will work better if I can feel the floor under my feet. And I've got permission to actually go into that room and say, I'm dyspraxic. Here's how I work better. I'm taking my shoes off. And if any of you need a fidget toy, you can have that as well, because I'm going to take a fucking great bag of fidget toys with me.
Now I think that's really interesting, because that wouldn't fit the social norm. And you know, a lot of people still won't understand that, but it's things like that that people need to understand, I believe, because if it helps you function better in the job you're doing, you're going to do better.
Absolutely. I saw a dyspraxic. I went to a Dyspraxia Foundation conference a couple of years ago. In fact, it's more than a couple of years ago, because it was just after I found out I was dyspraxic. And this fabulous woman who is dyspraxic got up to speak. And she started by saying, I'm dyspraxic. These are the things that help me. I've got my posh shoes on because it's a conference, but I'm going to take my shoes off and put my slippers on because I can feel the ground and I will feel better and be able to work better. And she did. And I wanted to stand up and applaud. That's something I've never forgotten, and I want to do it now.
Yeah, that's really good. It takes a lot of courage to do that.
It does.
I suppose once you've done it the first few times, you sort of get used to and people. I don't suppose people would react that badly to it. They might be a bit like, oh, weird, but then once you've got over that, then it's fine.
Well, and I think I've got an age advantage as well now, Ben. You know, I said I sometimes say I'm a dyspraxic granny. I haven't got anything to prove to anybody anymore. I'm not looking at these people and thinking, oh, I need to do a really good job of this because one of them might be responsible for my next step up the ladder. I'm in a position now where I can say, this is me. I'm doing well enough on my own to be able to say to you, take me as you find me, or you don't bother, but it's not my problem.
Yeah. No, that's a really good attitude to have. So in terms of dyspraxia, is there anything else you think people should know about with dyspraxia? Well, there's obviously going to be hundreds of things, but anything you think is worthwhile pointing out now in terms of what, so when you think about dyspraxia, what stress you when you think about it? Obviously, you spoke about awareness, things like that. Is there anything else you think you'd like to talk about?
Only to say that with the motor skills things, a lot of us find it takes us longer to get something, but once we've got it, it's fixed, and we don't lose that. So if there is something that someone with dyspraxia wants to do, I'm thinking more in terms of physical activity now. Don't let the dyspraxia hold you back. I've got a friend who's dyslexic and dyspraxic, and he's a black belt in martial arts, and he teaches kids. It took him much longer than his peers to get through each stage, but once he got it, it stuck. So some of it is, don't give up, but don't carry on doing something that really doesn't suit you. Things like, I can't draw. It doesn't matter how much I practice, I'm never going to be able to draw accurately. But I can take beautiful photographs, and I'm good at loose, because I think we're all quite creative. I love doing loose watercolors because it doesn't matter whether it's accurate or not. You can just enjoy the colors. So practice makes a big difference for us. If there's something you really want to do, go and do it and you'll get there. But don't waste time doing things you don't really want to do. There's always another way of meeting that need.
Yeah. What you like with directions, whether that's in the car or walking through a town or city, whatever, do you struggle with that at all? Or
I'm fine if I've got a proper old-fashioned map. These days I can't follow a set of instructions that go more than 3 steps.
Yeah.
And I definitely can't follow when somebody says, and you know my partner Nigel, so when we're out for a walk, he will say something about, well, we're going north, and I will say, I have no idea what that means. Are we going by that trip? Tell me, show me. I'm good with the sat nav. If we're in the car, I'm not good with using maps when I'm walking, because it doesn't stay still. So when I try to move around to orientate myself, I can't tell which way this bloody thing's going. So yeah, I can tell my right from my left. Once I've got something, I will walk, you know, through without any problem. But a map is my best friend.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I mean, I struggle with many of those things you described as well. So in terms of practical things, whether it's school or whether, like, how did you deal with like technology, things like that, or how do you find like cooking, or are there anything?
Technology at school was a fountain pen, and I was at a grammar school. I was at a girls' grammar school, so you had to use a fountain pen. My hands were always covered in ink, and I used to get into trouble for blots on the page. And I couldn't use a slide rule, which was the nearest we got. I mean, I'm a lot older. In terms of cooking, I'm messy. I'm a good cook, but I am messy. I will drop things, and I have learned in the last 12 months. So we got a dog last year, to shut the dog out of the kitchen, because if she's in the kitchen distracting me, I will make more mistakes and burn myself more often, and I'm terrified of dropping something hot on her. So one of my tactics is to shut the kitchen door and say, keep small children and dogs out of the kitchen when I'm working. So yeah, I do. I burn myself regularly using it. No, I've never burnt myself seriously, but lots of little touches, lots of little cuts. There's always stuff on the floor when I've finished, and I have to clean it up.
Yeah.
Which my partner thinks is hilarious, because he can actually prepare a meal without dropping half the onion skins on the floor, and I can't. So.
Yeah. That's interesting again, because with dyspraxia, I mean, like with anything, some people can be really good cooks of dyspraxia, some people can't at all. So it's interesting to know. So is there anything else dyspraxia related? Well, anything neurodiversity related, actually, that you think, you know, you want to talk about, or you think is worth?
Only how long it's taken me to realize that my lack of organization and doing, when there's a long time to do something, I won't tackle it till the last minute. And finally, through the coaching I'm doing and some of the other work around somatic influences, I've got to understand that we understand time internally, if we're lucky. And one of the impacts of neurodiversity for me is that I don't have that sense of urgency of I must do something until right at the very last minute, when I think I'm going to get into trouble because this is not going to be finished on time. And I have learned to say to myself, you might have 3 months to do that assignment. Do not beat yourself up because you don't do it in the first month, because you're never going to do it in the first month. But make sure you've got time at the back end when that sense of urgency kicks in, so that you can do it well, and get it in for the deadline, rather than having to turn it in late. But that sense of urgency, and I know it's the case for a lot of people with ADHD, that sense of, I've got all this time to do something, but I never do it till the last minute. And I've started saying to people, Ben, that's how you're made. You are not a tortoise, you are a hare. There's no point planning to do something 3 months before it's due, because you won't. because other things will come in. So plan to do it when you can do it and do it well. And that will be when you start to feel that, oh God, I've only got 2 weeks left or however long it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And as you were describing that, obviously ADHD sprung to mind straight away. Then obviously then you're thinking overlaps, or is it ADHD, is it dyspraxia, etc. Because yeah, I'm the exact same as many people with ADHD are, and no, it's a very valid point. So in terms of, well, do you have any like goals or things you want to achieve? Doesn't have to be neurodiversity related, just in general.
My goals these days are to live well, to be present for my family, particularly our grandkids who are growing up fast, and just that, to live well, to do something that I'm interested in and fulfilling. It's quite a nice place to be in life now, because I'm 65. I'll be 66 next week. So I can kind of say, well, is this where I want to be? Yeah, pretty much it is. And my goals are to live well, to be fair and kind to people, and to make a contribution, I hope.
Yeah, that's a very good answer. So, yeah, we're coming towards the end of the podcast today. Is there anything else you want to add as sort of final thoughts or final anything?
Only that the more work I do in this area, the more I think that all our conditions are interrelated, and that we are on a neurodiverse spectrum. I mean, a number of people who have autism and ADHD, or autism and dyspraxia, or dyslexia and ADHD. So my thinking on it is now, I don't worry, and I try to suggest to my clients that they don't worry about whether something is dyspraxia or ADHD or autism, as long as they can get the support they need for the impact, for the way that it shows up.
Yeah.
But just to know that that is neurodiversity, that the human mind is not a one-size-fits-all thing. And that it has its problems. It can be a pain in the butt. But it can also be our best strength.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I think that I totally agree with that. So it's been great having you on, Sue. Great to catch up with you. So I'm sure everyone listening will have took a lot from that, particularly those new to dyspraxia, or even those that do know a bit about dyspraxia. But, there's a lot needs to be done in this area. As I've said before, autism, ADHD, I'm very passionate about. A lot of other neurodiverse conditions, but I still think dyspraxia. I've met people who are autistic who haven't got dyspraxia. They don't really know anything about it, so it's or they might say that's like one way you struggle with X or whatever. They know a very base level of it. So yeah,
you're right. It's not well known, but it is very much part of the neurodiversity family, and the more we understand about and support each other, the better. Because with conservative estimates altogether, we're 20% of the population. If that was any other group, there would be far more recognition, valuing measures in place. So whether it's being autistic or dyspraxic or dyslexic or whatever it is, we are all neurodiverse and fantastic, and if nobody and we can support each other, we don't have to wait for the rest of them to catch us up.
Yeah, no, it's a good final point. I think fully agree. So thanks, Sue. It's been great having you on.
It's always lovely talking to you, Ben, and I can natter for hours. So
no, it's good. We'll have to see sort of one out in the future as well. Talk about things as well. Right, thanks guys for listening, and I'll catch you next time.